Joining us for a chat is Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP here in Nova Scotia. Claudia, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks as always for having me, Todd.
All right. So the budget last week, the Nova Scotia Premier says it's and the Finance Minister says it's the biggest tax break in the province's history. True or false?
Well, I'll use the words of the Finance Minister himself on Budget Day, who, when that was put to him, said, well, I might be a bit more humble about it. So the jury's out, Todd. Mm-hmm. I think, indexing, as we've said, is an idea whose time has come. We're the only province who hasn't been indexing tax brackets. So, the opposition has been pushing for that, and I think it's a good thing that they did it. The math seems to be that the savings to the average Nova Scotian family are going to be pretty minimal. So like $70 to $150, $200 a year. But, I think people were concerned about the principle of it. And of course, I think, the math on this is that as years go on, savings will increase. So I think that's true for this year. I think it's not going to make a huge difference to Nova Scotia families, but probably a good thing they did it.
Yeah, when you hear something like the biggest tax break in Nova Scotia's history, you certainly expect that to translate into more than a savings of $100 roughly a year, right? That let's call that what it is. That's nothing. I mean, really, it doesn't. If it is the biggest tax break in history, it doesn't come with a lot of sizzle, is what I would say.
No, it doesn't. And, this is why we've really been focused on, how do we give families a break right now? What are the things we can do? And there's so many things this government could be doing. I mean, if we're talking about the people who are struggling the most, of course, this is yet another year in the context of record inflation where income assistance rates were not indexed. Which really is a glaring omission in this budget. But, for most working Nova Scotians, housing, the cost of housing continues to be a huge issue. I think there's lots of ways in which families are feeling the squeeze and lots of ways in which the government could provide some direct relief, and we're just not seeing it. And so I think that's a challenge. But, obviously we'll keep pushing for that. And I think Nova Scotians are going to keep pushing for that because, no one likes a bait and switch. And as you say, this idea of, the biggest tax break ever, people are going to have so much money in their pocket when objectively they're not, is going to be disappointing to some folks for sure.
Do you have some concerns with the deficit at all? Is that something that you have concerns with, or maybe you have concerns that we've got a deficit of $400+ million and a lack of investment in some key areas?
Well, I look to the economists, most of whom seem to be comfortable with our debt to GDP ratio, seem to feel like we'll do okay. But, my big question about those numbers, Todd, is what do we have to show for it? And so what we have is a government who is constantly talking about how much money they're spending. And, I've made this analogy before, but, I think they feel like they can do that because for some reason Nova Scotians seem to think that Tories are good financial managers. We haven't seen that from this government. We've seen the most money ever spent, but the highest family doctor wait list still in history in this province since that wait list was created. Emergency rooms across the province closed all the time, people waiting hours for ambulances to come. So none of the things that they're spending all this money on are changing. Meanwhile, we have huge issues around housing and affordability. And so to me, the government is there to invest in Nova Scotians. But what are the dividends in those investments? I don't think we're seeing those, frankly. I mean, we were really happy to see a school lunch program. This is something that my colleagues and I have pushed for a very long time, and certainly the entire opposition has been making noise about, and I think that's important. So there are some good investments, but those are the kind of investments that have so much to show for them down the road. I'm not sure what we have to show for it otherwise.
Power bills. This is something again that not addressed, or you would say that they were not addressed in this budget. How to help people deal with the out of control power bills.
Yeah, well, this is what I mean when I talk about kind of ways that the government could directly support people. So, we've been pushing for ages for the creation of a low-income energy rate. Like close to half of Nova Scotians live in what is technically termed energy poverty. So they're paying too much of their take-home pay on power, and people know that. That's not a surprise to anybody. And then the question is, what are we going to do about it? And so, the one kind of big move this government made was to interfere in an independent process with the UARB, which resulted in a credit rating downgrade. And so now we're lending money to Nova Scotia Power. It doesn't make any sense. There is a bill moving through the legislature now to kind of change the regulatory structure of the energy system in Nova Scotia. That may, down the road, open up opportunities for the kind of changes we've been pushing for. But, this is a government that likes to talk about how impatient they are. The Premier says he wants to do things now. He could make life easier for Nova Scotians now and find a way to give them real relief now. And again, this is something we don't see in this budget. And it's challenging. It's challenging for Nova Scotians. We've talked about how they cut the heating assistance rebate program. They cut the Salvation Army heat program. These programs that were really vital to Nova Scotians being able to make it through a very cold and expensive winter like the one we've had, inexplicably we see less support for. But, we're seeing big tax breaks and other things for, I guess, modest tax breaks based on our previous conversation for Nova Scotians, but big tax breaks for developers to build. On their own, there are good reasons for those, but when you look at them against what is being offered to everyday Nova Scotians who are just trying to make it to the end of the month, it's certainly a little disappointing.
The move that on power that the government's making when it comes to the changes to the UARB and its mandate, and also a regulatory body which will be independent from Nova Scotia Power, overseeing who gets access to the grid. Are those good moves? What are your thoughts on those moves?
Well, we're still unpacking that, Todd. I mean, the way it works is that they hand us a 100 or 150 page bill, and then they say, let's debate this tomorrow. And then they say, any amendments we'd like to see in a few days. We just heard some presenters this morning in the Law Amendments Committee talking about it. I'd say on its face, it's not a bad move. But, I think the missed opportunity here is that, by opening up the legislation in this way, they could create affordability programs. They could create sustainability programs. Like, this is an opportunity to do all these things that advocates have been pushing for. And we don't really see any of those big things in this bill. We see a sort of structural change, which may make sense, but I think at the end of the day isn't going to translate into anything really meaningful for Nova Scotians in terms of affordability and sustainability, or for that matter, reliability, which are the three things we hear about from Nova Scotians. So, I think bureaucratically it might make sense. Is it going to make a difference right now for Nova Scotians? I don't think so.
Well, one of the red flags for me was that Nova Scotia Power didn't mind. They said, well, we're okay with these changes. So that was, to me, it's like, well, that ain't good for us if Nova Scotia Power doesn't mind.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I mean, I think, it really is a sort of bureaucratic change from Nova Scotia Power deciding, what gets on the grid and how it's allocated, to having an independent body that does that. Other provinces, like notably Ontario, have this independent body. So, yeah, I think it's fine. Nova Scotia Power is still going to have all the real estate, as it were, that they have, and all the power that they have. It will allow us to bring more renewables onto the grid, hopefully more easily, which we need to do. But we need a lot more reform than that, which you and I have talked about a lot over the years, and we're still waiting for the government to take decisive action on that.
Okay.
And we also are looking for them to do more on the efficiency side. We've heard that the government is shutting down this Greener Homes grant, which I know a lot of people, myself included, took advantage of to, transition off of oil. So we're looking for the government to come in there, too, to reduce our need for energy and also lower our bills, which ultimately is what Nova Scotians need.
Okay, in 30 seconds, that's all I have. Public housing, obviously disappointed in a lack of public housing investment, although there was some.
Huge disappointment. Yeah, I mean, I think 220 units in the next several years is better than nothing, but we have a wait list of thousands and thousands. I think it's maybe 6,000 for public housing right now. We have people sleeping outside from one province to the other. We need serious action on affordable housing, actually creating and saving truly affordable housing, and we saw extremely little of that in this budget, and it's really troubling in light of the number of people coming to our province and the need we already have. We will absolutely have a laser focus on getting this government to actually show up and do the work that's needed in the housing area.
Claudia, I always appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Todd.
Take care. Claudia Chender, leader of the NDP. I'd like to thank